Project. Today's event is co-sponsored by the 74. The Reinventing America Schools Project is housed at the Progressive Policy Institute and promotes a model of schools we call 21st century school systems, or systems that provide parents more choice and give schools more autonomy in return for more accountability. Our research shows that public schools that do this produce the most rapid improvement in student performance. Today's the third edition of our webinar in a series we are calling Untapped Expertise, HBCUs as Charter Authorizers. The title comes from a report I co-wrote with Dr. Kariga Rausch of the National Association of Charter School Authorizers. It highlights the historical impact historically Black colleges and universities, or HBCUs, have played in shaping the 20th century America, but more importantly, how we can train educators that meet the needs of Black students. We have an amazing panel of experts who come at this topic from vastly different perspectives, but also to the same goal. But before we introduce our panelists, we want to take a survey of who you all in the audience as you all are coming in. And so the survey will projected right now. We're asking you to identify which group that you most identify with as it pertains to this conversation. And so do you identify mostly as a parent, as an educator, as a funder, as a journalist, as an advocate, as a policymaker? If you're like me, I wear about 2 or 3 of these hats. But for today's conversation in particular, what hat are you wearing as you enter in this conversation? We do so because we do want to give our panelists a chance to sort of couch their questions in a way that really meet the needs of those who are in our audience. They all, similar to me, wear multiple hats as well, and can also bring those perspectives to this conversation. As you all are doing that, I'm going to allow them to introduce themselves, and then we'll project out on who's in this space. And so we'll start right here in the DMV where I am with Dr. Norris. Dr. Norris, please introduce yourself and tell us where you are.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Catherine Norris. I am currently serving as Department Chair of the Department of Curriculum and Instruction at Howard University. This is our teacher education program. Prior to being at Howard University, I was at Westchester University in Pennsylvania for 14 years. And then prior to that, the School District of Philadelphia for 18 years. So education is my safe space.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Coming from the Mecca, Howard University. Let's keep it in the Philadelphia area and take it to our good brother, Sharif El-Mekki.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Sharif El-Mekki. I was a teacher and a principal for 26 years, first 15 in the School District of Philadelphia. The next 11 were mastery charter schools. And currently I'm at the Center for Black Educator Development. We're working to rebuild a national Black teacher pipeline.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate you for joining and looking forward to your contribution. Let's go to our sister, Mariana McMurdoch.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's great to be here. I'm a staff reporter with the 74. We're a newsroom that focuses on K-12 education in the U.S. And with them, I've focused a lot of my reporting on teacher workforce struggles and challenges that many districts are facing, such as shortages, wanting to get more Black educators into the profession, and the challenges that face them once they are there regarding their own mental health and what have you. And thank you all for being here today.
Thank you for joining us. We're looking forward to your contribution as well. And last but not least, we'll take it down to Georgia, to the good brother, Dr. Miller.
I appreciate that, Dr. Valentine, and it's a pleasure to see everyone's names popping up in the attendee group. My name is Artesius Miller. I am the founder and CEO for Utopian Academy for the Arts Charter School Network, home of the 2023 Georgia Charter School of the Year. But I'm also wearing 2 hats because I'm a very proud Morehouse man, and I have the pleasure of serving as an adjunct professor of education at my alma mater, Morehouse College.
Thank you so much. Good to see you, brother. My Morehouse brother. There's no bias here, but just letting you all know we put that out there. So let's before we get into our first question, let's see who's out there in our audience. And so let's see the results. So more than half of the folks in the audience are actually educators. And so as you're answering your questioning, these are the folks who presumably are trying to figure out how they fit into this conversation as educators in schools. As educators who've been particularly taught potentially at HBCUs. But also, we're also seeing a movement, and I would want to hear from both yourself, Dr. Miller, and Sharif, on educators getting to the space of wanting to start their own schools and take their own experience to a level of leadership as well. We also have our second largest group, our advocates. These are folks who, at least in this space, would be the voices of how we bring this forward to states through state legislators and school boards and others. And so great to have these folks on board in addition to funders and others. So let's get started. In our first webinar on this topic, we emphasized the bond we all sort of as panelists have in searching for that great idea that's bold enough to push leaders to challenge ourselves to think about the future in a new way based on historical success. And all of us in our own spaces are really trying to push to the future and to challenge ourselves to think that what we're doing right now is not going to get us to where we need to be. On that panel and subsequent panels, we agreed that there's no institution more successful at training Black students in America than HBCUs. In our report, you'll see, data on particularly the percentage of African Americans who attend HBCUs, and it's not nearly as high as people think it is as a percentage of a population. But you look at the percentage of Black teachers that are trained at HBCUs, the percentage of Black PhDs, Black doctors, Black military officers. The disproportionate number of them are trained at HBCUs, even though most of them are underfunded. And so that history really drew myself and Dr. Rausch and others to say, if HBCUs are doing such a good job at training Black students at the higher education level, how can they get more involved at the K-12 level, a space that for all of us, I imagine us, have been really challenged with this for most of our careers. So let's start with you, Mariana. You write about HBCUs, and their impact on performance of Black students. Tell us what you learned about why HBCUs are so successful now.
Yeah, I'm happy to start with this context. So there's about roughly 100 HBCUs across the country, and these are some of our most, strongest, oldest institutions. Some of them predate the Civil War, and they're places where really you can bring culture and who you are into the classroom, which we know impacts your learning directly and makes you more able to share out in the classroom, to push for what you think is important in your learning. They're places where students often find mentors that look like them, which also helps them persist through college, and see, a path toward a career that they want to pursue. They're also places where oftentimes are more affordable for students to attend and see through their degree, and places with strong alumni networks. So really, these students are never alone throughout their college experience. And I just want to tout out two other statistics that might help this conversation, which is of Black teachers in the country, this is as of last spring, nearly half are graduates of an HBCU, which is really incredible. Again, for the size of, relatively small size of how many there are in the country. And there was also a study out of North Carolina at the elementary level, which showed Black students perform better in math when they were taught by an HBCU educated teacher. And I don't think that's a coincidence, really, because HBCUs, again, are places where you can bring your whole self to the classroom, places where high expectations are the norm, and really that mentorship to see students succeed through their degrees is paramount.
Thank you. I mean, you've given Dr. Norris an alley-oop there when it comes to for many folks the sort of the gold standard as it relates to HBCU College of Education, particularly training Black educators. And we're dealing with a math crisis. And if what Mariana is saying is true, we have no reason to doubt that the benefit of having Black educated at a school like Howard University on scale could make all the difference. What Mariana is mentioning is sort of right now. Dr. Norris, talk about the history of what HBCUs have done serving Black students, particularly Black teachers at places like Howard University. How did we get here, and what role has HBCUs played historically in training Black teachers?
I think that's very interesting, because when I think about what's happening now in the United States, everyone is just recently acknowledging that we need more Black teachers, right? And so we're offering money and programming to PWIs, and we're trying to figure out what can we do to get our numbers up in these institutions when this is something that we've successfully at HBCUs have been doing uh, for many, many years. This is not new for us. This is something that we have been doing. Many of our HBCUs started as normal schools, and they started as schools that were preparing individuals to go into the teaching profession. We've not only have been doing it, and like the number said, Mariana stated, over 50% of Black teachers are coming from HBCUs. And historically, what we've been able to do and why we have been able to be successful is because not only do we have, and we can't emphasize this enough, what it means to walk into a space and be welcome, feel a part, and feel that you belong there. So offering this space for our teacher education majors has been something that has been historical that we've been doing in these spaces. Having high expectations at HBCUs, we know that we have no doubt that our students can be good learners. We have no doubt that they're going to be great teachers. We know that this is what they're doing. And historically, we've been producing teachers and having them go into the class and be successful. Also, in addition, affinity spaces, when we talk about not just how their needs are being met as pre-service teachers, but also how we are preparing them, because most HBCUs, we know that students that come from our programs historically go back into their communities or go into high needs communities or Black and Brown communities. And that's where they're able to be successful with the students in the K-12 setting. So all of these things, I think, have been what has been happening on our campuses historically. And I think that when we talk about how we need to move forward, we need to have a larger voice in some of the conversations around what do we need to do to recruit and retain teachers of color? How do we make these spaces spaces where teachers are going to not only be successful as they matriculate, but be successful in the K-12 spaces? One of the things that HBCUs have historically done, and I think this is even before the language has come out about culturally responsiveness, this is just what we've done. This is how we've practiced. We've been able to have curriculum in our classrooms long before it was the thing to do, teaching Black children about Black history, teaching Black children about curriculum that is not the norm or that's not typical, going off, and as some people are now calling it, fugitive pedagogy, right? Being able to offer this pedagogy that's not common core pedagogy to supplement what our students are having in the classroom. And all of this together is what has been able to make us be successful historically in producing Black teachers.
No, thank you so much, Sharif. Your organization has partnering with Morehouse College and other institutions. What are you seeing about how your organization is working with HBCUs and what the impact has been?
Yeah, no, I think everything that's been raised is absolutely critical, and I would just really quickly touch on both what Mariana and Dr. Nara said, like the importance of investing and policymakers being held accountable for undermining HBCUs. I forget the number, but it was such an astronomical number that came out of some research about how much is actually owed by many states for at least, the public HBCUs. How many of them have had to close down their teacher colleges? Got my principal cert and graduate, degree from Cheney University, which, as Dr. Norris pointed out, was a teacher college. Right now, I can fit all of those educators at my dining room table, the ones who are in the ed prep program. Which that has an impact on the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania's number of Black teachers, number of prepared Black teachers, et cetera. And so at the Center for Black Educator Development, we're looking at HBCUs as critical partners in rebuilding a national Black teacher pipeline. Not only, for the students and understanding how much they, and I don't even want to call it like, punching above their weight, because they are weighty in themselves, right? And so, just the history, the critical aspect of why they were created and why they persist despite all the challenges, that sense of belongingness that Dr. Norris mentioned is something that they can then also future teachers can also pour into future students of theirs. right? And so that, that familiarity of what are, as Dr. Koso was saying, talks about Black teaching traditions, where they may be foreign in a lot of K-12 spaces, but they're not foreign. They're like germane to the HBCU experience, right? And so being able to translate that and then seeing like, oh, this is what it means to have high expectations and high levels of support. And I would also say these are critical times right now. This is not only the 70th anniversary of Brown versus Board, it's the 30th anniversary of Dr. Gloria Ladson Billings, who we call lovingly the notorious GLB, right? Like, and when she talks about the cultural responsiveness, it not just being this buzzword that you hear everywhere, everybody's culturally proficient and culturally fluid, right? But she often talks about like that you can't be culturally proficient if you also don't have academic achievement and if you also don't have political clarity. All three of those components make you a competent, the foundation for a competent teacher, right? And so often, as happens, people want to like separate and silo different aspects, say, oh yeah, we're culturally proficient. For too many schools, that means, oh, that's a workshop in August, once in a year, or that's a university read an article and then they just keep it moving. But it's not embedded in their practice. It's not part of their mindset and orientation. It's not part of their collective work, responsibility, and accountability. So for us, HBCUs are like, fantastic places for us to not only support and partner with, but also send our high school teacher apprentices there, as well as receive them on the other end and partner in between.
I appreciate that. In our report, we highlight a number of schools that were historically called Rosenwald schools. These schools were founded through a partnership with philanthropist Julius Rosenwald and educator Booker T. Washington. Over 5,000 schools from Texas all the way up to suburban Maryland were founded. But the overwhelming majority of those schools were closely connected to HBCUs, where Black students were educated in the Rosenwald schools almost entirely by HBCU educated educators, but then also attended these HBCUs, become educators, and then back into those Rosenwald schools. My family are co-founders of one. Our HBCU was St. Paul College. But to your point, Sharif, St. Paul College is no longer here. That was a Black educator pipeline in of itself. I want to come to you, Dr. Miller. You are both a product of an HBCU, an educator who hires HBCU alums. Talk a little about how attending an HBCU like Morehouse informed your career choice to become an educator.
I appreciate that. I think for me, it's personal, but it's also academic as well, in terms of my pursuits to become an educator. And I kind of want to hit from a perspective of what it meant to be educated in the rural South. So what we knew as a people was that education was our advancement out of certain circumstances, right? So my great grandmother, so there were different types of institutions that were created over time to educate us as a people. So we started with schoolhouses. So these one room establishments that almost were the replica of a church, in which we kind of snuck to educate ourselves, because we knew that if we were caught, we would be ostracized, tortured, or even worse, killed. Then we had the early establishment of public schools known as common schools. And then we started to see the development of our HBCUs. And then if we continue this timeline to where we are in present day, we have the opportunities to found schools for all types of students, right? For me, I say it's personal because my great grandmother started a schoolhouse in rural Mississippi, and she did it out of necessity, not only for her children, but for the kids in our community back in Mississippi. And of her children, half of them became educators, one being my grandmother, who was my inspiration. So I knew at some point I would step into the field of education. Like most HBCUs, there are a number of different careers that students are exposed to that some they may know exist and some they may not. For me, as a student that grew up in Southwest Atlanta, I didn't really know that a career on Wall Street was something that was attainable to start as an undergraduate. And so my initial thought was that I was going to be this financier that would have a career on Wall Street. But as I progressed in my matriculation at the college at Morehouse, I recognized that that wasn't my calling. One of the unique things about the trajectory we have on our HBCU campuses is that you understand your purpose, your why. And for me, I realized that there's a certain level of impact that has transcended way beyond Artesius Miller before he entered the campus of Morehouse College, but it also is instilled in every single student that attends and eventually graduates from the institution. And so I realized that I had to have something about my life, my legacy that would impact others in ways in which I was reared. And so I realized that for me to be able to do that, I had to be able to give back and pay it forward in a way and in an industry that I saw most of all of my family members, and that was stepping into the field of education. And it was confirmation for me when I enrolled in graduate school and started to take courses at Teachers College at Columbia University. And I started to get involved in the public educational system between New York City and Bridgeport, Connecticut, that the role that I sought as an educator was truly a part of my DNA, but also a part of the story in which I will later tell. Little would I know that those experiences I had at Morehouse, those experiences I had in New York City would lead me to eventually design and develop a school that would have even greater impact back in my hometown of Atlanta. And so fortunately for me, I used all of the experiences I had in New York City as an incubator for research and best practices to be able to come back to my hometown, to the same place where I studied for 4 years at Morehouse College, to invest back in public education. And fortunately, 10 years or 10 plus years later, that impact has transcended at this intersection of K-12 and higher education. For me, as a professor or adjunct, this is my way of being able to reinvest in the place where it all started, to see more Black men not only know that there are careers that are available for them in this industry of education, but I can equip them with the tools that they're going to need to be successful. But then on the flip side, as a full-time educator or educational administrator, I have the impact of seeing how my work leads to an outcome where I have students that will start in the four walls of a school building like the one that I'm sitting in now, and would eventually land their feet at a Morehouse College. So it's for me a full circle moment, because I have been able to be a part of an experience that will later lead to tens of to scores, from scores to hundreds of students that would start their journey in a school setting by which I developed, and eventually make their way to an HBCU. Most importantly, that trajectory to a Morehouse College.
No, thank you for that. And I'm asked this question a lot. I'm sure you are as well, Sharif, about this sort of this Black educator pipeline. And a lot of the answers are, I've said there's no silver bullet, but it does take intentionality from educators like yourself, Dr. Miller, and others to sort of, be intentional about the work that they do and be consistent and persistent about it over time. I want to get back to so our paper that again, and myself and Dr. Rouse wrote outlines 4 key ways we believe HBCUs can impact the future, just as they've done in the past. Firstly, we believe HBCUs can redesign public education by overseeing and expanding quality public school options to improve outcomes for parents and students. And so we want to make sure that we keep in mind that all the discussions and all the papers, all the things we're talking about, in its essence is really how do we get particularly Black and brown babies in front of educators and in school buildings that are quality, they're going to get them to where they need to be in life. And obviously ensuring that we have quality teachers is a means to that. And so, Sharif, I want to begin with you. You began your work as a classroom teacher and eventually as a school leader of a public charter school. What did you discover about the state of parent demand for more quality school options that really meet the unique needs of their students?
Yeah, and I would just quickly say to your earlier point, I entered the profession. I was on my way to law school. I met a Black man educator, Dr. Martin Ryder, who was leading an initiative in Philadelphia. That was a partnership between a nonprofit, Concerned Black Men, the School District of Philadelphia, and Cheney University. Like, they were coming together to support 500 Black men entering the profession. So a lot of, one, that when you're talking about the history, connecting the dots between the work that you, me, Dr. Miller, and many others are doing has been ongoing, throughout time. Caroline LeCount back in Philadelphia in the 1800s was saying we need more Black educators for these Black students. So I would say, one of the things that in particular that I have found that Black families are looking for, the same thing that my parents were looking for back in the 70s, a place that where, their Black child or their Black children were safe culturally, intellectually, emotionally, spiritually, and of course, physically, right? Like that their intellect was seen them as full human beings. We're seen if parents aren't seen as full citizens, Black families aren't seen as full citizens in this country, how can their children be seen as full and worthy students? Right. And so they're looking for a place that was really subversive to the orientation of these United States towards Black children. And so that was the space that I continue to see families looking for, like where are their high expectations, where are their partnerships, that are we're looked at as partners, not through charity, not through contempt. Is often how our families are having to navigate. And then I wrote a piece a while back that really talked about like the Great Migration. Today is about families trying to find, schools that are conducive for the learning of the children and matches the aspirations that they have for their children, the love and authenticity that they see in their children, and that being respected and places where that can flourish. And so we see families trying to find all kind of places and maybe different schools for different children in the same household. So all of that is a part of parenting these days. Is being able to, back in the day, at least in Philly, we used to have the SEPTA public school, public transportation, and you have to look and match and figure out which bus connects with this trolley to get to that point. That's how families are navigating the systems today.
For years, 10 years, I served as a charter authorizer in my school district here in Prince George's County, Maryland. And one of the things that when folks would apply for a charter school, one of the things they have to demonstrate is demand. That what they're doing and what they're endeavoring to provide is not already provided by the district, at that point in time. Dr. Miller, you're a school founder and leader in addition to all the things that you do. Why, I imagine in Georgia, when you were applying for your charter, you had to similarly demonstrate demand for your school. Why was there such a demand for your school and your teachers? And how did your status at a public charter school impact your ability to recruit and train teachers compared to traditional public schools in Georgia?
I really appreciate this question. I think I want to give some type of landscape at the micro level of the community in which I initially designed a single site school to serve. In 2008, our school system made national headlines as the second school district in American history to lose their accreditation. This happened for the fifth largest school system in the state of Georgia. There was very clear at that time and in the years that would follow that there is a crisis and we have to do something about it. As the fifth largest school system, this is also a community that is comprised of students of color, primarily Black kids. And I wanted to find a way creatively as a solution of designing a school that will help restore faith back in public education. Not to say that if you are a product of the school system, you're not worthy, but I want to find a way to say, how can we give parents the assurances that their children will be prepared to enroll in college? They will have some type of plan beyond their K-12 educational experience, but more importantly, they will be able to lead a lifestyle for not only themselves, but for their community in which everyone will be proud. And so I started at that basis, and I started to look at things through an educational, but also economic lens, because I studied economics as an undergraduate. And I realized that there were systematic inequities for access, and then also just in general, the options that have been made available to students here in this school district as compared to other communities and school systems across Metro Atlanta. And so what I did, I said, you know what? I want to not only restore faith back in schools, but I want to create an innovative solution that will allow students to have access to careers that many of them would never imagine that they would have access to just based upon the geography of where they live. But I also want to build sustainable impact, not only for those students and those families in which I'm looking to serve, but also for the larger community as a whole, where the community has started to see signs of economic decline. And so understanding that all of those things were key ingredients to the development of a school, I recognized that there would be a need. Our work with Utopian Academy for the Arts has been completely grassroots since the very beginning. One of the things that I know that anyone on this panel would recognize and say that as educational entrepreneurs in our own right, when you believe strongly in something, other people will start to believe in it with you. And so all I had was this vision, this very bold vision at a very young age, that a single site school would give all of these things available for the students in which we desire to serve. And over time, I recognized that even with, and you got to understand that as a new school, there are certain things, certain levels of uncertainty that people will have against you. There's no track record. There is no brand recognition. There are no stakeholders to be able to promote and advocate for you and what you're looking to do. But this also, for me, allowed me to translate all of this into the recruitment process for not only the students in which I wanted to enroll, but also the faculty and staff. Having a very specific vision and mission for this type of work, because this is something that you're not assigned to. This is a school of choice. As educators, we have the autonomy of being able to self-select based upon the grade level served, the school type, whether it's traditional, whether it's private, whether it's public charter. But I knew that all of those things will be important to those that I will want to work alongside and to be able to lead. And there are certain risks in which you take when being able to not have any prior experience with those individuals, but that one common denominator for high expectations and high quality for the students in which you sought to serve or that you would eventually serve. I recognize that that would be necessary, but it would help us if there is that shared mindset of being able to produce the results that we know are necessary, in which we will also be held accountable. So I think over time, it was the mission that allowed us to be able to develop the team that would eventually allow us to produce the successes that would be profound, that would later replicate into other schools here in the state of Georgia. So again, that mindset as a leader, as a visionary, is so critical for what is articulated. Because when you are very clear and resolute in what you're looking to do, it's very clear for people to say either yay or nay. And it's okay if it's not something that you're willing to take on, because this is very grounded in spiritual work in which we do. But at the same time, we're in the business of being able to educate and change lives for the better. And when you have that solid team, it will allow you to also begin to have that brand awareness where people would say, hey, I want to be attached to something like this because I see what you're doing, I hear what you're doing, but I also see the products of your labor.
I appreciate that. I mean, I think there's something unique about, again, the ability of leaders like yourself to have the autonomy to make those decisions at the school level. That in many cases in districts like mine, where you have 130,000 kids, 210 schools, 9,000 educators, that is a more centralized and bureaucratic way of doing that. And so we've seen success in particularly recruiting diverse groups from schools like yourself because you have so much more control. But to your point is the control over the mission and being able to speak directly to what those educators can expect as educators. We want to go back out to, before I go back to Dr. Norris and others, I want to go back out to the panel, to the audience, excuse me, and ask you a very direct question. Based on what you know about the future of education, but where we are with the state of teachers right now, are you confident that the teachers of the future will be ready for the future of education? We're in this space now where most educators don't have control over information, right? Students can Google anything now. You got YouTube University, of all the other, and so a lot of the responsibilities of educators are being rethought about what role and responsibility where will students like yours Dr. Miller, who become educators, what will they be teaching in 2050? And how are schools like Howard University looking towards that future now? Because the students you're educating right now, 18, 19, and 20-year-old Black educators, how are they being prepared for a world of 2050? The second way the report that we wrote outlines how HBCUs can impact the future is by building what we call educational legacies, by deepening connections with local communities. In our report, we highlight that the historical impact HBCU lab schools and K-12 schools physically located on HBCU campuses that allowed education students to learn by doing, by creating a pipeline of future educators into HBCUs, but allowing those students to also research and connect with students in real time. Dr. Norris, the College of Education at Howard University is tasked with training the next generation of Black teachers, but you are unique because your campus is also home to a public charter middle school. How do you collaborate? How does the College of Education collaborate with that middle school around training teachers? And what has been the impact of that collaboration?
Thank you. So it's really exciting. So on the campus of Howard University, we have a preschool, which is an early learning center. And we work closely with our early learning center. And we also have our middle school. We have been fortunate enough to allow our students to be able to have opportunities to go into the classroom very early on in their teaching major. Our secondary ed students go into the classroom and are able to do observations. They're able to participate in activities, do their internships in their fields. So we try to make sure that the experience is mutually beneficial so that our students are benefiting, but also the students in the K-12 or in the middle school classroom or in the preschool classroom are also benefiting. They benefit in many ways, being able to see college students and college experiences, being able to see people who are training to be teachers, and not just teachers, but we also have our ed psychology students and our counseling ed students that also go into the middle school. So that has been the main way that we have been connecting with field experiences, internships, and opportunities that way. Our biggest program in curriculum instruction is elementary education. So that's K-6. So it doesn't give us the opportunity to connect in that way. However, I will say that in the fall, we're moving into a brand new state-of-the-art building. And this building, minor building, which is a historical building on campus, will house not just Howard School of Education, but it will also house our middle school in the same building. We have an opportunity there, for example, for our science teacher ed teacher to work in the lab in that science middle school classroom. So opportunities that exist that will exist for us in the fall that we currently don't have. We're excited for, and we're really excited to see where that's going to go. Another way that we've collaborated with our middle school is our principal in the middle school serves on our teacher advisory committee. So they have an opportunity to impact what happens in our teacher education program. Our advisory committee informs our practice, and we're able to inform what happens in the school. So we make a connection in that way as well. We want to make sure that our experiences when we go out into, whether it's in DCPS, public school systems, or whether it's the schools on campus, that it's mutually beneficial. We see opportunities for research done by us, for us, and for our students in that way, and we're hoping that we're going to have positive impacts in that way as well. So we're excited about what the fall brings and how that working in that same space allows us to collaborate in a way that's more intense than even what we're doing now.
That's exciting. I mean, I'm familiar with the building. It's a very historical building, but to have those two entities under the same roof,
Yeah.
I'm going to be watching. I'm sure a lot of us will be watching really closely. We mentioned on a previous webinar, we've had folks from Delaware State University, which allows students at their public charter school to attend Delaware State University with tuition free. Stillman College just got a charter school authorized on their campus in Alabama. Coppin State in Baltimore City, and so this is happening. Even in the chat, there's Benita Gordon had a question. She says, "I'm the founder of Miami Microlearn Hub a micro school in Miami. What can we do to support bringing back lab schools at our HBCUs? You don't have to answer that now, but there's clearly energy around Bethune-Cookman, Edward Waters, FAMU University, and places like Florida say, what if you gave FAMU the power to authorize and direct the future of education in the state of Florida? How powerful that could be. Dr. Miller, you're not only a founder of a charter school, you're also an adjunct professor at Morehouse. How would a school like Morehouse College or the AU Center, being a charter school authorizer, potentially impact your school's ability to train teachers and for Morehouse to recruit students?
I appreciate that question, and I think I want to look at this twofold, kind of going back to the basics. So I kind of shared somewhat of a historical perspective of how we as a people were educated, right? So we've always been a part of the conversation, but are we always a part of what's happening in practice? And I think that we have been truly, as organizations, as institutions of higher learning, we haven't been able to really tap into those same affordabilities that are made available for other types of institutions. So for example, every state has a different set of authorizers. In Michigan, for example, it could be a state Department of Education, it could be a local school board, it could be a community college. In Georgia, it may look different. It may be just the State Charter Schools Commission and or local boards of education. I think understanding that we have so many graduates from HBCUs that play roles in both policy and practice, we have nothing, and we have individuals that are in Washington to help to develop the policies or the frameworks that are necessary in order for us to be able to do this work. Many of them are HBCU graduates. So for us, we have to understand that there is power in the work that we do with leading our schools, whether in the classrooms on our college campuses, whether it's as administrators working very closely with campus leadership to develop lab schools or to have those operations. The work has taken place and will continue to take place. I think that there is a level of engagement that Morehouse definitely would love to have, understanding its role in position in the educational sector, not only in Atlanta, but also Georgia. And so we would notice, if we were to really look at, as Mariana identified, we have over 100 HBCUs across the country. There's a staple significance that these schools, these colleges and universities play in their respective backyards. So why not engage them in ways that would allow their network of experienced leaders to give a direct involvement in what K-12 education looks like? At Morehouse, through the course that I teach, school design and leadership, students are equipped with understanding everything there is to know about charter schools in particular. They take those principles, the tenets of a blueprint of what most charter school petitioners will develop in terms of their plan being put in black and white to develop a school type. They have these prototypes by which they develop as their end the semester project. And they present these as key ideas in which they can implement back in their hometowns. So not only are we showing them through our course catalog of what is possible, but we also can take that same translation and also be able to design schools of the future that not only will maximize the role of our HBCUs as it relates to what's happening in our respective states, but also the national landscape of K-12 education. And I feel like it's really necessary for us to think about this, because not only would that lead to outcomes for what it looks like for our students, how they learn, what they learn, even the physical environments, as Howard is doing some incredible work with their physical milieus of how students will be educated at their charter middle school, the lab school that's on their campus. But we want to give that same affordability to future educators to understand that, look, there's so many ways in which you can get involved. And we then now have an incubator for those that are designing schools, that are innovating practices that may be out of date, that need to be refurbished. But then lastly, it also leads to outcomes by which we kind of dream about, but we haven't been able to see just yet, because we have not had that direct level of access to say our schools can take advantage of this. But lastly, I will say that Morehouse College is pro-choice. Not only is Morehouse right in Atlanta, but you have three neighboring institutions that are also HBCUs that have such an even higher level of impact or value add that has the beauty of having infinite possibilities for not only their campuses, but also the educational landscapes and those school systems that are right there that want that support, that want to be able to say, hey, look, this is what our school system can look like. But if we don't have that agency to be able to have that authorizing power, we may never see it. But with all of the brilliance that we all know as products of HBCUs, I'm just excited by the possibility that those conversations are happening right now, but they are in development for us to be able to see that actually take place in the future.
That's important, man. I'll just say really quickly, I had a mentee of mine from the DC metro area, went to Morehouse, studied computer science, and he called me. He says, Uncle Kurt, they call me Uncle Kurt, I'm thinking about going to education. I said, oh, school teacher's like, no, I took Dr. Miller's course. I want to open my own school. He's a businessman. I mean, so he was like, I want to open a school. I'll hire a doctor. I'll hire Dr. Almeki. I'll hire Dr. Norris, but I have this vision. Abdul's his name. And so it was, they did it. You can open the eyes of folks who are not sort of going into thinking out, education as a profession, but business, community development, social work as a profession, and becoming a school leader is so important. Before we come to you, Sharif and Mariana, I do want to go back to our survey and asking folks, 84% said no, they are not confident the teachers of the future will be ready for the education of the future. And let's go to you, Sharif. The third way the report outlines how HBCUs can impact the future is by strengthening ties between K-12 and higher education, by developing unique partnerships with schools they authorize, providing access to higher education campuses, creating pipelines of new students, opportunities for dual enrollment, mentorship programs between schools and students, and research opportunities between faculty and schools. Sharif, your Center for Black Educator Development is leading the way in creating pipelines of Black students into teaching profession, most importantly, using research-backed solutions. Every time you speak, you are outlining the research that is driving the work, which is so important. How could an HBCU authorizing charter schools, what could it mean for how you innovate and how your center reimagines teaching for the future?
Yeah, and just real quickly on that survey, the majority of students who actually spend 4 or 5 years in college, tens of thousands of dollars in debt, they also say that I'm not, prepared to teach, and I'm particularly not prepared to teach Black and brown students. We got to recognize that majority of teachers coming out are identified as white, and so a significant number of them have no connection to the Black and brown communities, and they're being armed with educational theory that doesn't align with our people, our community, our history, our aspirations, and then that's what they're being armed with dissent. But look, HBC, this will be a game changer, if HBCUs were, at scale, connected, because I think this is part of the challenges. When you look at a Black teacher pipeline, let's say it's about 12 years long, right? You at least, high school, early exposure, clinical experiences, that's a significant part of our work, right? Working with high school students, career technical ed courses, and really responding to them as well, where they said, we need Black teachers. Then the college experience, and then also, early career, right? And so that's how we look at the Black teacher pipeline, at least the foundation of it. Like, what does it mean? But with HBCUs, you can look at it as a holistic way instead of piecemealing. That there's going to be connectivity, fluidity, not only common language and experience, but also sense of purpose, right? And because, too often, I think that's the disconnect between how we're developing educators. There's some folks, it's like anywhere else, there's the job and then there's the work. HBCUs that are authorizing high school students, they understand the work. They understand what it means, the connection between education for liberation, that teaching has always been part of the leadership lever that activists have changed this country, and have to continue to agitate for change in this country. That has often been in an education led by educators, been a part of the educational ecosystem. And that part, so having high schools connected to HBCUs, not only is it a pipeline for HBCUs, and we already see that there's a, increased enrollment in a lot of them, but this is also, more connectivity, more understanding of like how the pipeline actually could and should work. So for us, where we have, CTE courses, basically teaching 101, but from a Black pedagogical framework, a Black historical lens. And imagine a high school, I'm a ninth grade, I'm a 10th grader, I'm learning, oh, here's what Black child psychologists say about teaching Black children. And then they're taking dual enrollment courses while they're in, juniors and seniors as part of this CTE course and model with that HBCU. Then they enroll in the HBCU and they get a deeper, more sophisticated level of some of that. They have the opportunity to go deeper. And then, as Dr. Norris described for her middle school, then they're also doing their student teaching and other work with those students, right? Because then it's like it's a community responding it. And I think this is a big part of like inviting youth into the profession, right? Not waiting till they graduate from college and then you see them working. They're like, hey, have you ever thought about being a teacher? We're going to support our students in anything that they want to do. However, not inviting Black youth into the profession is at our own peril. And that kind of partnership we can start doing much, much earlier.
What you said about inviting those students into the profession, but also what Dr. Miller is doing is giving them power over designing the profession of the future. So this is a level of empowerment that these students don't ever really have because
because you're not only inviting them to the profession, what we're actually doing is inviting them to solve problems that they had no hand in creating. Ultimately, that's what empowerment means. Like, I'm asking you to help solve this problem with your context because it's actually your future.
That part. Exactly. Dr. Miller, Dr. Norris, and then I want to come to you, Mariana. Dr. Norris?
I just wanted to jump in because Dr. Omeki made me think of one of the things that I left out in talking about the middle school. We talk about what the impact has been and how we have collaborated. But a big part of it, so not only are they doing the observation and going in, but when we graduate, our teachers, they're going in to teach at our middle school. We've been able to close that circle, and that's been a really big part of how we're collaborating as well.
And what that model is historical. I imagine similar to Dr. Miller's grandmother's school and in the Rosenwald schools. It was a loop out of Rosenwald into St. Paul, back in the Rosenwald, out of the school here in Prince George's County into Bowie State University and back. I mean, it was a loop, a pipeline like no another. Mariana, you've written recently about districts recruiting Black teachers, but also the state of teacher prep programs. How could HBCUs having control over K-12 schools impact how they train teachers moving forward, Mariana?
Yeah, thank you for that question because I love the imagination part of it. And I can imagine like a flood of positive dominoes falling in a way. So one being, these are institutions where, as we've mentioned, in many ways, there are experts in pedagogy in educating Black children. So they've really honed the craft of teaching, and we could think about the high expectations and high support that Sharif mentioned, championing who students are in the classroom and their history to foster a sense of belonging, as Dr. Norris mentioned, which could also help curb down the line, if that's more in K-12 settings, curb some of the depression we might be seeing in the midst of this youth mental health crisis. You could also think, you mentioned Curtis FAMU, were HBCUs to be more integrated in part of the K-12 curriculum design process in Florida or in places where resistance to teaching Black history has been so loud in recent years, it could be transformative. You might also think about there's more opportunities for teachers to learn by doing with these co-location schools, have more mentors, again, that look like them and they can see a path to staying in the profession. They might be more encouraged to try out innovations, or otherwise they might not have that institutional support. And then also the more integrated that HBCUs might become in our K-12 ecosystem, the greater possibility for funding as well. So the DOE right now has some grants for HSI, Hispanic Serving Institutions, tribal colleges and universities, and HBCUs because of how integral they are to producing diverse educators. But that might increase as we desperately need it to increase as we have more and more students of color across the country as our population grows. And I also wanted to share some specific examples from some of our work in Pine Bluff, Arkansas. So a number of our reporters went down to Arkansas last year and this year and really looked. This is a community in Arkansas known as America's fastest shrinking city. So they're facing a lot of the challenges that many districts are of population decline, enrollment decline, needing to recruit more educators, more mental health staff, and really like everything you could imagine concentrated in one place, and especially violence as well in their community. And I think the more that, as something Dr. Miller mentioned, of engaging your backyard, having these HBCUs partnered with the communities that surround them, makes the way for more intentionality in these school design decisions. You can listen to community needs and say, oh, where are the shortages in your district, and how can we, build that into who we're going to push recruitment for this year, which was the case at University of Arkansas Pine Bluff. There was a lot of feedback between the local school, Pine Bluff schools and the university to see, what science of reading curriculum are you using? Is it working? And that was only possible because they had this relationship with the HBCU. Another example is we know that the praxis exams, or the exams where you're finishing your teacher training and about to enter the classroom, for many Black students struggle with these exams. There's been research to show that there are some cultural differences in the way that questions are worded, or even the nature of that kind of high stakes testings itself. So University of Arkansas Pine Bluff pioneered these boot camps, a few weekends a year where they bring in experienced educators to really meet this need in the community. And then lastly, when you think about, like, we all want, once Black teachers are in the classroom, for them to feel like they can stay in the classroom for their whole career. And we know that many teachers do leave the classroom after just 5 years. So to keep those stronger retention rates and support them, we can point through a few models, and one of them being residencies, Grow Your Own, which you all might have heard about. But the core of those programs is emotional and financial security, is at least what I've been hearing from folks in those programs. And those tenets of emotional and financial security are key to HBCUs in their model as well. And there are places where the teaching candidates graduate and oftentimes want to go back into their communities where they grew up, where they saw all of this disenfranchisement, and want to invest back, pour back into their community. Such was the case in Pine Bluff. And so I think the more that all of those models that, again, HBCUs have honed over centuries can only be like a positive domino.
Thank you so much. You answered one of the questions in the chat about the role of parents. As authorizers, these HBCUs can put in their application as a requirement that you do a parent survey prior to even submitting. And so that's a role that HBCUs can play in getting parents involved. Another person in the chat mentioned, Mahida Abdul Kareem mentioned, what about HBCUs providing professional development to help create and maintain affinity spaces? The other thing, assisting in accreditation of new teachers, even alternative pathway. These are ways that HBCUs can get involved. We got 2 minutes left, and so I want to give you all 30 seconds apiece just to sort of give us your final thoughts on this concept and this conversation. 30 seconds to you, Dr. Norris, about what you've heard today.
I think it's all good. I think it's really good that we're all having these conversations. I think it's important. I think that we need to be looked to HBCUs as leaders in the field. And I think it's good that the government is offering all of these grants, but I think it needs to be more of a line item and not a grant opportunity. It needs to be more permanent, and we need to be recognized for the work that we're doing, but also be able to have the opportunity to lead others in the space as well.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Mariana, 30 seconds. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I would love to see just more awareness of the role that HBCUs have played in developing the diverse teacher pipeline that we have and in need in the future, and really pouring in and making these initiatives permanent, as Dr. Norris just said.
Dr. Miller, 30 seconds. What are your thoughts?
I'm very encouraged. I want those classic examples that are exemplars, like the work that Howard is doing, to be used as a case study to show evidence of need and how we can do this work with having the relationship between a charter school and an HBCU, and then lead to more conversations about how we can replicate these successes in terms of how we can authorize more schools that look like this, that have these relationships for more students that expand our impact. So I'm encouraged.
Thank you. Final word, Sharif. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, agreed. And I think that, what was described by, the panelists, really, we should see that at scale. I would want to see we want to be in every Black high school offering our CTE course. And we want every HBCU to have a school that they're authorizing, that they're taking responsibility for, right? Because that's a big part of this collective work, responsibility, and accountability. We can't keep talking about the Black teacher pipeline without talking about our HBCUs. It does not make sense not to be able to do that. And we have to recruit Black youth and not be disconnected from the social, political, economic realities that they face. That means creating this type of pipeline that's tightly knitted and welded together.
Thank you so much to my panelists. An amazing panel, an amazing conversation. For those who are interested in this concept, please reach out to us about finding out how we could come to your state, talk to your HBCU, talk to your state representatives about this concept. Please read our report, Untapped Expertise, HBCUs as Charter Authorizers, co-written by myself and Dr. Carrega Rouse. Follow us on social media. Follow, Utopian Academy for the Arts. Follow the 74, the Center for Black Teacher Development, and Howard University College of Education for all the things that they're doing in this space. Thank you all so much. Have a great afternoon. See you soon.
Thank you.